All right, everybody, let's jump into our last set of genetic traits called sex-linked traits. We're going to go over these in a little more detail in a note-style structure. Just know that these connect with the genetics that we've learned so far. So we learned about, dominant, recessive, heterozygous, homozygous, recessive, heterozygous, dominant, genotype, phenotype, a lot of new words with genetics. Then we did complete dominance problems where one allele dominates over the other. And then the problems at the beginning of this week were codominance problems where they're both capital letters and one does not dominate the other. And so you get these situations where you get both of those alleles showing up. And now we're going to get into sex-linked traits. And let's talk about why they're called sex-linked and what that actually looks like in a genetics problem. All right, so let's jump over to these notes so we can write things down as we talk about it. Okay, so we're talking about sex-linked traits. And why are they called sex-linked traits? They're linked to the sex of the individual or the sex chromosomes. And so let's just do that right off the bat. These traits or these pieces of DNA that for proteins that make things happen are found specifically on the sex chromosomes. And there's X and Y, and you've probably heard of those in one form or another, but let's get into a little more detail on what the sex chromosomes actually are so we can be clear on that. Okay, so in humans, that be us, we have, do you remember how many chromosomes we have? There are 46 total, but 23 pairs. 23 pairs of chromosomes. Now, I'm not going to draw all 23 pairs. Why are they in pairs? They're in pairs because you get one copy of a chromosome from mom, one copy from mom, and one copy from dad. So all these genes, why have we been having it like, oh, mom is heterozygous. Why does she have a capital and a lowercase? Well, she got one from her mom and one from her dad. Same situation with sex chromosomes. You're going to get one sex chromosome from your mom and one sex chromosome from your dad. Okay? So chromosome number 23, they name them in order. Chromosome number 23 is called the sex chromosomes. Why are they called that? Because these are the chromosomes that will determine the sex of the baby. And so how does it work? Well, there are two possibilities. So there's XX. So if you get two copies of the X chromosome, that turns into a female. So that means that the body will develop with the female reproductive system and the female genitalia and organs and all the differences that go along with being female. If you are XY, then you will form the developmental system of a male. So the proteins that are made in this combination turn out to have male genitalia, male reproductive system. The proteins from this combination make the female reproductive system and the female genitalia and all the things that go with them in puberty and all that stuff. All right. How does it get determined? Well, let's take a look. Well, if mom is female, she must be XX. So that's mom. And dad must be XY because he's male, right? So then they have a child. They're going to give one of these to the child. Well, mom has two copies of the same thing. So she's either going to give an X chromosome or she's going to give an X chromosome. So mom is giving the child an X chromosome. So you get your X chromosome from your mom. It's the dad that's going to decide, is this going to be a boy or a girl? And it's not like dad actually makes a choice here. What happens is the sperm that actually beats all the other sperm to the egg and is able to get inside the egg first and then combine DNA is the egg that's either carrying an X chromosome or it's carrying a Y chromosome. And so there are millions and millions of sperm released at one time. Roughly half of them are carrying an X, roughly half of them are carrying a Y. Whichever gets there first, that's the chromosome that the baby will then have, and it'll determine whether it is a boy or girl. So dad is the one that determines, is it going to be X or Y? So yes, the father determines the sex, but it's not like dad has a choice in the matter. He doesn't get to pick which sperm is going to get there, just kind of by luck. All right, if you were to look at these X chromosomes and see them, and you can actually do that under a microscope, you'll see that the X chromosome, this is the X chromosome, would look something like that. And the Y chromosome looks something like that. And so you might be like, huh, those look a little different. Yeah. The X chromosome has much more DNA or is much longer than the Y chromosome. So because of that, because of the Y chromosome lacking this area here, there are genes up here that code for proteins that create traits like color blindness, whether you are colorblind or not. Baldness, oh yes, baldness is on the X chromosome, whether you're going to go bald or not. And so if I'm a female, I'm going to have 2 copies of the X chromosome. So I will have 2 genes for color blindness, 2 genes for baldness, 2 genes for all this stuff that's up here. The Y chromosome doesn't have anything. So if I'm a male, I have 1 X and 1 Y. I only have 1 copy of each. I would have 1 for color blindness, and I'd have 1 for baldness. So hopefully I got a good one, because I only got 1. Mom has 2, or females have 2. The males only have 1 copy because the Y chromosome is so short, it's missing all that DNA. So you'll notice when we do sex-linked traits, for males, you'll see that there'll only be something on the X chromosome, nothing on the Y chromosome, whereas females will have something on both of their X chromosomes. Okay, so let's put that into words just so we can remember it. The X chromosome has more DNA than the Y chromosome. So there are genes on the X chromosome, I'm just going to say on the X, that are not on the Y. Now you might be saying, well, are there things on the Y chromosome that are not on the X chromosome? I do believe they have found some of those, but they are not majorly important, obviously, because if there's a gene on the Y chromosome, a female would not have that at all. So if it's something important, then they would be totally missing out on that. But there must be something to the Y chromosome, or otherwise it wouldn't develop into a different sex than having 2 X chromosomes. Right? So there must be something to it. And this is things that they're still doing research on as we speak. Okay. So how does this all play out? So when we do our letters, you will put the letters, so the letters go on the X chromosomes only. Only the X chromosomes are going to get letters on them, not the Y chromosomes. So keep that in mind as you are working on things, okay? And so you'll see that when I do a couple examples here, that the X chromosomes will be the ones that get the letters. All right, I'm gonna go to another sheet just because we're gonna do a practice problem here. Speaking of practice problem, let's jump right into it. Okay, so I'm gonna go with color blindness. Okay, color blindness. You might be thinking, what is color blindness? Color blindness is that the receptors in your eyes that pick up light you may not have the right receptors to pick up a certain wavelength or color of light. So you might be colorblind to green, or colorblind to red, or colorblind to blue. Okay, you could be completely colorblind, which means you're seeing the whole world in black and white. That's kind of what cats do. But typically there's only certain colors you pick up and other ones you don't. Usually you pick up some color, but just you're missing a certain one. Okay, so you cannot pick up certain colors with your eye. So for instance, if you don't pick up blue, you're still going to see a difference between my letters and the background, but you won't see them blue. You'll see them like black or grayish. Okay, so you'll think I'm using like a black pen right now, even though I'm using a blue pen. All right, so how does this trait typically work? Well, there's a dominant trait and there's a recessive trait. So I'm going to choose a letter B because the letter C would really not work. So I'm going to use B for blind. So capital B is what we call typical. We don't use the word normal because there really is no normal. Typical just means no disease or no difference. Okay, lowercase b is colorblind. So colorblind is a recessive trait. All right, so if you have one of each, this one would dominate over this one. Capital dominates over the lowercase, just like it has before. But colorblindness is sex-linked. Is sex-linked. And so how does that make things different? What that means is that it is on the X chromosome. So you don't actually write this. These are not your options for your letters because you have to put them on the X chromosome. How do you do that? Well, the way we write it is we say, all right, you could have an X chromosome with a capital B. You could have an X chromosome with a lowercase b, or you could just have a Y chromosome, which gets no letter at all. And then we say this would be the typical. This would be for colorblind. And this would be for nothing, because it doesn't affect this trait at all. So what are the possibilities? Well, a lot. So here, the sex of the child will be determined. So I could have female, and she's got 2 capital B's. Okay. I could have a female that's got 1 capital B and a lowercase b. Or I could have a female that's got 2 lowercase b's. Okay, so far, seems okay, right? You're still going to get one of each. One from mom, one from dad, one from mom, one from dad, one from mom, one from dad. But since we're dealing with dad could give a Y chromosome too, the other possibilities are you could have a boy with a capital B on the X, again, nothing on the Y, or you could have a boy with a lowercase b on the X, again, nothing on the Y. And so these would be your possible genotypes. So what is this person for this situation? Capital means typical, and they have 2 capitals, okay? So it is a typical person, no color blindness, but you have to mention their sex now. So it's a typical female. All right, we look at our 2 letters, capital and a lowercase. Well, we know capitals dominate over the lowercase, right? So the capital dominates over the lowercase. So whatever the capital is, that's what's going to turn out to be. The capital is typical. So again, we're going to get a typical person, even though they're a carrier because they're heterozygous. And what sex are they? XX means they're female. All right, here we got 2 lowercase letters. So the lowercase is what wins out. So this person will be colorblind. And because they're both X chromosomes, female. Now on to the males. Okay, they have 1 X chromosome. So really, whatever letter they have, that's what they got. So in this case, it's capital. Capital is typical. So this is now a typical, and X and Y mean it's a male. And then in this case, we got a lowercase b. Lowercase means colorblind. So this is a colorblind male. And so what you will see is that these sex-linked traits show up on men more than they show up on females. Why? Because in order for a female to be colorblind, she would need 2 copies of the colorblind gene. Okay, because if she gets 2 typical ones, she's fine. If she gets at least 1 typical one, she's fine. She would have to have both of her chromosomes have the colorblind gene. Whereas a male, because you only get 1 copy of the X chromosome, whatever that copy is, whatever mom gives to you, you've got it. So if mom gives you typical, you got typical. If mom gives you colorblind, colorblind. And I'll bring this back to what we talked about with some possibilities. Okay, so we mentioned color blindness. We also mentioned baldness. So baldness works the same way, and baldness is recessive too. So here's the deal. Who's going to determine whether you're bald? Well, it's the person giving you the X chromosome. If you're a male, that's mom. Mom is giving you the X chromosome. So mom is going to determine whether her son is going to be bald or not. And that's very interesting because you're right. A lot of people look at their dads and go, like, am I going to go bald? And they look at their dad and they think, oh, if my dad's bald, I'm going to be bald. No, it's not your dad you're going to look at. And you're not going to look at your mom either because your mom most likely will have a typical gene. So she's probably not going to go bald. So then the situation is you got to look at your mom's side of the family. Look at the men in your side, on your mom's side of the family, like your uncles, your grandpa, and say, all right, are they bald? If they're bald and you're a boy, or a male, then good chance that you might be bald too. That's who you want to look at. Uncles and grandpas on the mom's side of the family, because mom is giving you that gene. Okay, so I just want to point that out. It usually shows up in men more often than it shows up in women. For instance, baldness, we see baldness in men more often than we see baldness in women. Okay, so let's make a little note of that. So sex-linked traits show up in males more often than females because of only getting 1 X chromosome. Because you only get 1 X chromosome as a male, whatever you get is what you got. Whereas a female would need 2 copies to turn to a different phenotype. Okay, so I'm going to snag one more piece of paper. Let's do an example problem with this, and then you'll be ready to go. Okay, so let's go over here. Let's do an example problem. All right, a female carrier for color blindness has a child with a typical male. Okay. What chances are there that the baby will be colorblind? All right. So same situation as we did with all of our other problems, complete dominance, codominance, same 5 steps. Always start off with your letters. All right. So we're dealing with color blindness. I'm going to use B. Okay. Color blindness is recessive. So I'm going to use a little b for color blindness. Capital B is going to be for what we call typical or not colorblind. All right. But again, since it's sex linked, it's X to the capital, X to the lowercase, and then a Y. Those are my 3 possibilities. So typical, colorblind, and then you can just say none or nothing. All right, what's step 2 after we do our letters? Draw a picture. Okay, so let's get mom, froed up mom, dad. All right, here's where it gets a little different. Before you even get into capitals or lower cases, you need to start off with their sex chromosomes. So if mom is mom, then mom must be XX and dad must be XY. Boom, right off the bat. All right, let's go back to the problem. Female carrier. Okay, there's the key term right there, carrier. So if you remember, carrier means you have it in your DNA, but it didn't show up. So the only possibility for that is to be heterozygous, meaning one of each. So mom must have a capital and a lowercase. Okay, with a typical male. So typical, we know, is a capital letter. All right, but you're like, what's the other one? Well, remember, the other one's a Y, so nothing goes on the Y. So you only need to know the X. So dad must have a capital. Boom. They're going to have a child, and we don't know anything about the children, and we want to know what are the chances the kids are colorblind. Okay, so we're trying to figure out possibilities for the kids. What do we do when we're trying to figure out possibilities for the kids? We run a Punnett square. All right, so put mom on the side. Don't forget the X and Y chromosomes, very, very important. And then we'll put dad up top. Okay, and then you run the Punnett square as you did before. X to the capital, X to the capital. X to the lowercase, X to the capital. I'm going to put the capital first. It doesn't really matter, but it just keeps it straight. X to the capital and a Y. And then X to the lowercase and a Y. Okay, let's take a look. So let's do our genotype ratios. I've got one of these, so I've got 1 X to the capital, X to the capital. I've got 1 X to the capital, X to the lowercase. Oh, sorry, 1, not a 2. Okay, I've got 1 X to the capital Y. And I've got 1 X to the lowercase y. All right, phenotypes. What do these people come out to be? This is a female, and she's got capitals, so she's typical. So I say 1 typical female. Okay, I've got 1. This is a capital and lowercase. The capital is going to dominate over the lowercase. So typical is going to be here too. So 1 typical female. Oops. All right. This is a capital. Capital is typical and nothing on the Y, so that's the only thing that wins. So this is also a typical, but now it's a male because it's XY. And I have 1 lowercase, so 1 color blind male. Again, notice it showed up on the male, but it did not show up on the females. This is typically what happens with sex-linked traits. Okay, so 3 of them are typical, 1 of them is colorblind. What is the question asking me? What are the chances that the baby will be colorblind? The chances are that 1 out of 4 will be colorblind. So 1 out of 4 equals 25% chance colorblind. And according to this, if it's a female, you're good. Not going to be a colorblind female. Only if it's a male will be possibility of a colorblind. Okay? And that's how you solve those types of problems. Again, same steps: letters, picture, Punnett square, genotype, phenotype. The only difference here is now you're putting the letters on the X chromosome. So if it says this is a sex-linked trait, then you have to do it this way. If it does not say it's a sex-linked trait, then you don't put them on the X chromosome. Okay? So you have to read the problem and see, am I dealing with a sex-linked trait? Am I dealing with a complete dominance trait? Am I dealing with a codominance trait? And based on what the problem tells you, then you know, do I just use capital, lowercase? Do I have two different capitals? Or do I have capital and lowercase on X's? Okay, that's the difference. That's the little tweak with sex-linked traits. All right. I hope that is making sense to you. Again, if you need any help with this or anything else related to these types of problems, give me a text message or a Jupyter message, or you can come to office hours on Wednesday and Thursday from 2 to 2:30. The next video will be going over 2 of the problems that you need to do. So now that you've learned sex-link, you need to go do a series of problems. I think there's 5 or 6 of them. And then I'm going to do a video that shows you how to solve 2 of them. Okay, so I would try them on your own, then watch the video, see if you're doing it right. But, you know, if you get stuck, watch the video. All right, have a good one, everybody.